Alright, so this is the first day of the video shooting for another episode and we have complete blackout. Hey everyone, welcome to another fascinating episode of Road to Rap. Well, actually a sequel to the designing episode, but if you didn't watch it before, please go to the link in the description below because it's all connected. Today I'm going to work with the wraps I designed myself with all the tips and tricks I showed you previously. Both wraps are difficult for the installation but from two different perspectives. The first one, for which we have this car over here, will have to be matched with the car body parts, so like door handles, bumpers, whatsoever. And on the other one, I will have to pay attention to line up the graphics perfectly. So let's get to work. I just finished the passenger side, and the things I really had to pay attention to during the installation were mostly the stains on the design. I used the no stretch technique for the deep channels all around, so that means I still afterward had to line up this long stain around the runner section perfectly, and then also the stains under the door handles, rear and front, under the window, and here we are with, I think, really tricky section on this side, because this section over here was a separate panel, so that means I still had to line up the graphics perfectly, keep the stains matched perfectly, and also keep the text straight. I'm happy to say I finished this car. And the rear end was the last section I was working on. And we have two doors, so right, left. And I also had two panels. So, you know, the design has a lot of elements which have to be lined up perfectly. So to prevent mistakes during the installation, the first left door or right door or whatever, I did it beforehand. So I stuck one panel onto another, then I have installed it all in one piece. And because that vinyl has flight system, I could pull back the vinyl on those edges and then open the doors and finish them up. As I said, I could open the door and finish it up, but I had two problems. First off, that edge, it was already wrapped. I couldn't pull it back and I couldn't even move it to the left, to the right, not even for a centimeter. Then the second problem is the door is combination of convexes and concaves, and it's kind of like falling to the front. So it turned out I had a lot of vinyl over here which I couldn't stretch. Why? Because I had this little stain over here which needed to be matched perfectly with the emblem. But what I could do was that I could shrink the vinyl. So I did it 3 times, I think, and that's what it is. It's matched perfectly. And yet, few words about the front end. You know, I like to say there is nothing like according to the plan, right? And that's what it was with the front end. First off, the bumper. Bumper was supposed to be wrapped in one element, but the problem with the bumper is that I had to stretch the vinyl a lot, sideways, so everything matched perfectly. So to prevent too much struggle doing that, I split the bumper into 3 sections. So bottom and 1 and 2 sections under the headlights. Then the top section actually comes from the hood. Of course, before I made that decision, I double checked if the plan B will actually work. What I found on the front bumper were those sharp edges over here, which I could use for the overlap. And you have to know that design is pretty random. So it doesn't appear to be visible even it's overlapped. And also splitting the panels made it a lot easier for me to match that stain over here alongside that edge and also that stain under the headlight. I'm pretty happy with that wrap, and you know there is some outcome of it. Even if the car is very well measured, even if the wrap is very well prepared, I think there is always something to be changed or maybe adjusted during the installation. But before you do so, always put the panel on the car, think twice and make the right decision. And that's what I did with the bumper. And now let's go to Katowice to wrap, well, this time German car with another project of mine. So, the wrap on this car is finished. I'm pretty happy with the final result. It was a huge struggle to match it all together. So I took a note beforehand and the whole design was prepared such way so it was easier for me to be installed. As I mentioned in the previous episode about this little thing, that little issue, car is 3D object and the print file is 2D. So that's why I took a note beforehand and I press shrink the bonnet so I could stretch it slightly so I could easily match it with the front fender, and also the front bumper was much shorter than in real life. So these wings over here were stretched so they could match with the bonnet and the fender, and also this section over here was shorter so I could stretch it so everything falls in place all together nicely. And this section over here between the bumper and the front fender still matches perfectly. You know, I like to say there is nothing like according to the plan. Well, this section over here was planned with the logo type. But why it's not there? Well, what actually happened was that I had to lift up the wrap on the sides a little bit. So I had to lift this section too. And in the result, this little section of the logo type will be covered with the license plate. And that situation reminded me that it's always a good idea to keep such things on a separate layer. This wrap over here, in my personal opinion, is the most difficult job both the designer and the wrapper can have. For the designing, it's a lot of figuring out how to press shrink the design beforehand. For the installer, it's a lot of figuring out how to stretch and where to stretch the design so it matches all perfectly. So to compare, this solution over here is the easiest you can have. Solid color on the joint section. Always go for it when you can, because please keep in mind, even this section over here, just one, will require figuring out and press shrinking the design beforehand. In the previous episode, I showed you the perspective of the designer, and today I was a wrapper. And what is the outcome once again? Well, the measurements are the most important part of the process, but also please don't forget, place the panels before you start the work on the car so you will have time to figure out where to start, where to shrink it, where to stretch it. I really hope these tips will help you with your work. Thanks!